how do you actually grieve? My real experience in grief comes from losing children. I'm turning my pain into purpose, and I am learning how to grieve in a healthy manner, and I am learning how to communicate that with you. Today, I'm talking about Doka and Martin's work around grief styles. And I believe that an organized brain is a mentally strong brain. And this is kind of that same concept when they talk about grief styles. They really, when they started their research, they were researching the difference between feminine and masculine grieving, like what happens and how do male and female gender specific grieve. And then they realized that yes, there are feminine and masculine characteristics, but that we all are very unique and different, and we have these two styles, but maybe a balance between the two styles is most healthy. So they identified two distinct styles, the intuitive style and the instrumental style. When I talk about that, as far as the mentally strong brain, I often talk about like an emotional brain versus a compartmentalized brain, right? And neither one of those extremes is mentally healthy. Sometimes we have to go there as a temporary coping, absolutely. So an intuitive griever, which is kind of the feminine, but we actually want to grow to be balanced in both of these areas. So an intuitive griever needs to grieve by exploring and processing these feelings, mostly outwardly, and they're very strong, intense feelings. I often see this in husbands and wives who have lost a child, and they're grieving so differently that unfortunately the marriage doesn't last because they can't find a way to grieve together, and yet they are the only two that really know what they're feeling, right? Or experienced the same loss. An instrumental griever is grieving cognitively, right? It doesn't mean that they're not grieving. And I think, as I am primarily an intuitive griever, right? And so I am, outward. I want to just, fall down and cry and scream. I have a punching bag and I punch the bag to release my anger. Like, it's very outward and intense. An instrumental griever is still grieving. They're just grieving cognitively and inwardly and trying to solve it as a problem, right? Here's a problem. I've lost my child, or I've lost my spouse. I have a significant loss in my life. How can I fix that? Now, in extremes, both of these can be unhealthy, right? An intuitive griever that has no organization to those intense emotions, everything gets enmeshed together. And I often talk about this in the emotional brain. I am an emotional brain. Like, I was born with it, and now at the age of 50, I finally am learning how to organize it, right? But if it is all enmeshed together, right? Have you ever met someone who had extreme loss and then they're having lots of negative self-talk? They have spiritual conflict. There's significant injustice in their life. And it's all mixed together, and it ends up resulting in depression. Oftentimes clinical depression, because we don't have it organized. On the other hand, you have the instrumental griever who is cognitively trying to fix a problem that cannot be fixed, right? We can't fix this problem. So in the extreme, this person could be compartmentalizing and not processing these feelings at all. And I talk about this a lot. It likely will come up in other areas of your life. So if we look at these grief styles, instead of everybody fits into one of the two categories, which we now know, even in gender, nobody is very, 100% feminine or 100% masculine, right? But instead of thinking of this as two places where am I one or the other, think of it as a continuum, right? And that the extremes on either side are not healthy. That somewhere in the middle, a blend, a balance, you will identify with one of these styles. For example, I identify with the intuitive style, but I also am looking at this instrumental style and I'm like, I need to do some of that to organize my brain. The cognitively, like I'm doing the research around the grief studies and the grief theories and grief books. I'm trying to actually fix the problem of how to grieve, right? I can't fix the problem of my grief, but I can fix the problem of how to grieve. I can address my spiritual conflict. I can address my negative self-talk, right? Those are all cognitive skills. This is why I'm a huge proponent of cognitive behavioral therapy. The way that we think is going to impact our behavior. And in this case, our healing from intense grief. As you look into grief styles, you will read and you'll go, oh, I'm this or I'm that, right? I want to challenge you to look to the other style and say, where can I be more like that? So if you're an instrumental style and you're like, oh, I'm cognitively working this whole thing out, I challenge you to take a moment and do what I call control grief. Bring something to you that is going to evoke an emotion. We all have them. And allow yourself to cry, grieve over that loss, right? You might not have to do it as much as the intuitive griever, but I'm challenging you that you want to bring that pain to the surface because you are at higher risk of kind of suppressing it and not processing it at all because it's not a problem that can be fixed. You want to just put it in its box. So regardless of which style you are, the intuitive griever who feels intensely, knows the pain and the emotion, versus the instrumental who wants to process cognitively, wants to fix the problem, doesn't want to feel these emotions. Both need to share in the other style. Can't change who you are, but we can grow in being healthier, function better, and mentally stronger. I am sorry that you have experienced intense grief. I have also experienced intense grief. I lost an adopted son in 2005 in a drowning accident. I lost my biological son, Reggie, in 2016 from DRPLA. And I lost my daughter just almost a year ago from sudden unexpected death and epilepsy. And she had epilepsy because she had this same DRPLA. I don't want to say I understand because we are all different, but I can tell you I have felt the pain that you are feeling. And I am an intuitive griever trying to use instrumental skills to organize my brain so that I can grieve in a healthy manner. And I believe that you can too. I believe that we are all mentally strong.